What's up, Wizards? It's your dude Deb from the Mtg, and we got a fun one for you today because March of the Machine has been out for, let's just say, a week as I record this, give or take an hour or so. So with a week in the format, that seems like plenty of time to actually affect some stuff. So today we're going to go over the top 3 new decks in March of the Machine Standard. Now, there have been some cards from the set that are affecting individual decks that already existed. You know, like Rona is a 4 of in the Esper Legends deck. There she is right there. Multiple people in the MTGO Challenge running all 4 of this card, which makes sense. And it's a really weird one. 2 different decks in the same MTGO Challenge are running sort of Once and Future in mono red. But I guess it's working out. And Nano got 11th place, which is, you know, not terrible. You're in the top 16, so you're in the mix. It's not a bad addition to the deck, and it's kind of a pretty interesting one too. But what I'm more interested in is what brand new decks are in this format, right? I'm just kind of tired of the same old Grixis and mono black piles and soldiers and stuff like that. So let's take a look at 3 brand new decks kickstarted by Cards from Mom. Now, I'm going to start today with a deck that I think is actually going to make a bunch of people in my comment section pretty happy. I get the question all the time, can you make the 4-mana Tezzeret work in Standard? And so far, the answer has been no, but I'm happy to report that Sacha Kopigny in the BOA qualifier number 3 has made this 4-mana Tezzeret finally actually kind of do a thing. They piloted this deck to a 5-1 finish at the event, which wasn't super well attended, but all the best decks in Standard were there, and we still got 5-1 with this thing. So I think it's a pretty good pile, and for what it's worth, there is a version of this deck that also finished in the Standard Challenge. But this is the one I want to look at, mostly because, and this really shows you how minor things can tip the scales, MTG Melee has a dark screen by default. So I think that really helps all of our eyes. But anyway, let's look at this deck real quick. It does run Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh. Believe it or not, it does that. In case you haven't seen this in a while, I think the most important thing is its passive, right? The first activated ability of an artifact you activate each turn costs 2 less to activate. And that lets you do a couple of important things. The deck has Reckoner Bankbuster, so you get to activate it for free. We've had that trick the whole time, though. And it doesn't really do much. What it actually does in this deck, this Tezzeret, is it allows us to basically free flip incubate tokens. We just transform them for nothing at least once a turn. I also want to point out that Tezzeret specifically doesn't say like the first thing you activate on your turn. It's each turn. So you can for free, you know, transform an incubator token on your turn and do the same thing on your opponent's turn, again, for free. So Chromhost Sea Shark actually has done some work already in the early days of this format, not just in this deck. We'll see this again today. The card is actually proven to be pretty boss. Now, because of Seed Shark, most of the rest of the deck is just like spells. You know, they run like 2 Graveyard Trespasser and stuff, but they also have 2 main deck Duress, 2 Blue Sun's Twilight, which is a fun spell to play, all 4 copies of Make Disappear. I mean, if you've got Chromhost Seed Shark out, you've probably got some like little dudes running around, you know, after you cook them, after you transform them. You got a bunch of dudes laying around, so you can pretty easily get casualty on this. Makes sense to play 4. 4 cut down, early days of the format, you're going to run up against a fair number of aggro decks. Usually in the early days, fastest deck wins. It's been that way forever, so 4 cut down in the first week of the format actually does make sense. 3 go for the throat main deck too. So again, just removal, counter spells. You got some duress in there to protect yourself. You know what I mean? Blue Sun's Twilight to steal stuff. It's just a assortment of like decent blue and black spells, along with Tezzeret, who does more than just the passive ability. He can also draw you cards. He can make your Bankbuster just a 4/4, you know, instead of having to crew it or whatever, which is kind of nice. So he can make your incubator tokens into 4/4s, which is an upgrade most of the time. So Tezzeret is just really, really sweet, and specifically this deck, and I'm glad he finally found his deck. Oh, by the way, the deck also has 4 Shieldred, because why not, you know? Never leave home without it if you have swamps in your deck, I guess. Aside from that, I guess I should also note some weird tech in here. The deck has 27 lands, and 3 of them are blast zones. That's the extra 3 lands are all blast zones. I guess because like this deck doesn't have any good way of sweeping the board. Black doesn't have a whole lot of great sweepers right now, and you probably do want a kind of specialized sweeper because you don't want to sweep all of your tokens off the board or your own Chromhost Sea Shark if you can help it, right? So Blast Zone makes a fair degree of sense here, and I kind of like the inclusion. Altogether, I was just really excited to show you guys this deck because not a week, really, literally, not a week goes by where someone's not like, what's up with Tezzeret, though? You make him work? And it's like, I guess we can now. I'm really interested in getting some games in with this deck. Haven't done it yet. I have played with one of the decks that we'll look at today, and I was really impressed. That's why it's the last deck we'll look at. But I'm not sure this is the worst deck of the day, but it just doesn't have a whole lot of analogs. This is the only Dimir controlled list that I could find, besides the one that finished pretty low, honestly. For real, though, in the MTGO challenge. So, the deck isn't super popular or anything, but we've got at least one pilot that finished really well with the deck, and I'm allowed to be a little bit excited about that. If you can play this deck, give it a shot. Let me know how you do. But let's move on to Jeskai Control. Now, there's a reason that this deck is number 2. That last deck was number 3, because both the other decks we're going to look at today have a fair amount of proof of concept, This is at Community Turn Yay by Marius Heck piloting Jeskai Control to a 5-1 finish, which is pretty good, We just talked about how good 5-1 can be, but if that is not enough proof of concept for you, it also got 6th place, sorry for the wide screen there, in the standard challenge that just took place yesterday as I record this by KVZA or perhaps Kaviza. Both of these Jeskai decks are fairly different, so I want to look at both of them for just a second. But we'll look at this one first, again, because MTG Melee defaults to a dark screen. Are you listening, Wizards of the Coast? Do the thing. Why is it a bright white screen when I go to your website? Anyway, that's enough. That's enough, whinging. Let's look at Jeskai Control by Mr. Heck over here, which piloted again to a great finish. Now, there's a few new cards in this deck. A couple that I'm actually pretty excited about, like Volcanic Spite, making it into a deck. I was pretty sure this is a decent removal spell, and we see a couple of different lists running over the first week of Standard. But we also see Elspeth's Smite in here, in a 3-color deck that can't run like Laydown Arms or something. Elspeth's Smite makes plenty of sense. This exiles, first of all, and it's got plenty of targets in current Standard. It technically has more targets than Cut Down some of the time, I guess Cut Down can take out 1/4s like Adeline, whereas this can't, but still, this can take out 3/3s, whereas Cut Down can't. So I just really like the exile on this. I'm glad that someone has decided to play this card. Aside from that, there's 4 copies of Sunfall. They're still playing Farewell, but there's no, depopulate. A lot of sweepers in here, though, right? Brotherhood's End, a White Sun's Twilight, a Farewell, so number of Silver Bullet sweepers. But Sunfall is the big one that gets the play set because, again, Exile is so good. And sometimes this is going to leave you with, basically a 4/4 or a 5/5 once you pay the extra mana to transform the incubator token. So Sunfall's been really good in the games that I played against it on Arena so far this season. I'm not surprised to see it show up in a control deck, right? Aside from that, though, there's Eurobras Forge, which is a really spicy include. I'm going to pop whenever I see this card in a deck, and it's not in, to best of my knowledge, it's not in the other Jeskai decks. So bold inclusion here, but you need more than just a couple of Planeswalkers and a Chrome Host Seed Shark, which we'll get to in a second, to finish the game in your Jeskai control list, right? And instead of doing like Zurgo no Jutai or something like that, they've gone with Eurobras Forge, and honestly, I can't fault them. Card is pretty good, but like I said, Chrome Host Seed Shark showing up in this deck and in the other Jeskai control lists that did really well in the Standard Challenge. Card is just kind of popping up everywhere. I really liked it during spoiler season, but it failed to make my top 25. And maybe, just in terms of Standard at least, my top 25 is like all formats kind of smushed together, weighted towards Standard and Commander. But this probably, all things considered, should have been on my list. I don't know why I kept it off. I really liked the card, but I just wasn't sure that it was quite enough when reading it. But apparently it is more than enough once it's out. And it doesn't die to Cut Down. It doesn't die to like Lightning Strike and stuff like that. I think that's kind of helping it along a little bit. But yeah, just once you can get it out and, protect it or keep it on the table for a turn or two, maybe you play it on turn 4 or 5 and play a 1-drop or 2-drop spell after it or something. Make sure you get value, There's a lot of ways to play this card, and I think they all kind of end up being good. The deck also has Wandering Emperor, Teferi Temporal Pilgrim, so some sort of top-end Planeswalkers. Wandering Emperor, just a decent removal spell, but it can also win the game. So I feel like the deck cobbles together just enough win conditions to actually make something happen. And with sweepers like Sunfall, Farewell, White Sun's Twilight, decent removal spells like Smite and Spite. Smite and Spite. March of Otherworldly Light, you got Smite, Spite, and Light all in this deck is decent removal spells. So it just seems like a passable control deck that, again, has been able to assemble just enough win conditions to actually make the thing work. And if Seed Shark stays out for like 2 turns, you probably win. There's also kind of a combo here that's a little sneaky with Chrome Host Seed Shark. Obviously, the Sunfall is going to exile your own Seed Shark. Sucks a little bit, but when you cast the Sunfall, you're going to get effectively a 5/5 just from casting the Sunfall in the first place. You're also going to get at least one other Incubate token that's a 1/1 because that's how Sunfall reads, right? But I imagine some of the time you're just banking Incubator tokens until you pull the trigger on Sunfall, and then all of a sudden you have like 4 guys and your opponent has nothing. So, you know, that's probably a pretty good little interaction right there. Just altogether, the deck looks strong, but like I said, this deck is a little bit different. This one plays Fable of the Mirror Breaker in it instead of some of the other stuff that you could be playing. But I guess it wants to copy the Chrome host. It wants to ramp into the Zergo and Ojutai, which it is playing 1 copy of. Note that Mr. Heck did not, but Kaviza is deciding to play the 1 of Zergo and Ojutai. I'm happy about that. Hope it stays in the deck. Aside from that, though, the spells are pretty different. You know, we saw Fires of Victory and stuff in there, but in this one we see Memory Deluge, Abrade, Flame Blessed Bolt, Disruption Protocol, because you can tap the Incubator tokens to cast it as a counterspell. That's pretty sick, you know. Wandering Emperor is in here, so there's some similarities, but these decks, when you really think about it, I'm going to switch over now, just so you know, are actually kind of pretty different. You know, again, Deluge, Fires of Victory, there are some similar cards, but altogether, you know, this deck is playing, you know, some of the sweepers, but it's not playing Sunfall, any Sunfall at all. Whereas this one's got 2 Farewell. It does have a Depopulate and a Brotherhood Zone. So they both play a fair number of sweepers, but obviously the one that went 5-1 at Community Tourney plays way more sweepers. I mean, a play set of Sunfalls should really tell you something. And I guess I like it because it's a deck with blue in it that doesn't play a single counterspell. Would you look at that? So, just a neat little deck here. I've been prattling on about it for too long, but I'm glad to see Seed Shark actually doing some work in the early days of the formats. Cool card. Now, next up, let's look at our last deck of the day. This is my favorite deck of the new format so far because I've been trying to make it work for a few months at least, maybe 6 months, something like that. And it's always felt almost there, but I think it's finally all the way there. And there's plenty of proof of concept for this deck. You see Pepisra for 13th place in the standard challenge, which is in the top 16, but doesn't sound too amazing. There are multiple other versions of this Boros Blink deck, we'll call it, in the standard challenge. So I'm interested in the fact that not only did it get, you know, a 13th place finish, but again, there were other decks. It wasn't just this one player. There were other decks on this list. But if you want a good one, I'm not saying that this one isn't, the one we're just looking at isn't a good version because these are really similar. But if you want one that we know for sure is good, this is Boros. They're calling it Boros Ramp. And again, it's really kind of a Boros blinky mid-rangey thing by Dafton Direct. This won all the marbles, first place, the BOA qualifier number 3. And again, there were a lot of big, important, you know, well-proven, time-tested decks from Standard in that event. And this took all of the cheeseburgers, first place. So I think it's time to pay a little bit of attention to it, right? So what is this? Well, I want to call it Boros Blink. I would like to do that because it's got Guardian of Girapur in it. Now, it doesn't have Touch the Spirit Realm or anything like that. You would think that it might play that card because it's got so many things to blink in the deck, such that Guardian is a very, very good card. You know, you've got Ambitious Farmhand in here, Spirited Companion to draw you cards and stuff, Anointed Peacekeeper to pick different cards if you want to do that, Lorna of the Third Path to bust up artifacts and enchantments, Sarah Paragon to replay basically everything that I've already named, so that's kind of important. But you've also got Itali in here, along with the Sanctuary Warden. I want to point that out so you can blink that if you want to. But, you know, Itali is the big boy here. I was surprised not to see a whole lot of Reanimator strategies on this card. Now, there are Reanimator strategies, a fair number of them really, playing like a 1 or 2 of Itali. But the way people are playing this card in the early days of the format so far are to ramp into it, or just to play a mid-range game plan until they get to 7 mana and then play this. This deck is called, again, labeled Boros Ramp, but the only thing that actually ramps in the entire deck is Fable of the Mirror Breaker. that is the Rampy card. But obviously, you've got Ambitious Farmhand to get you lands, right? That doesn't ramp you, but it does get you the lands to play these spells. Spirited Companion can draw you lands. Guardian of Ghirapur can blink either one of them to help you get the lands again to get to these 6 and 7 drops. When you flood out, you didn't really flood out because you have Italy in your deck, right? It's also noteworthy, I guess, that Fable of the Mirror Breaker can make a treasure token, and if you get to enough mana, you can transform Italy if you want to. I doubt that it ever gets to that point, but it's at least a thing you can do. But there's some other ins and outs. We play a few Planeswalkers in the deck. By the way, Chicken is here. I would feel bad if you didn't actually get to see her. She's been in my lap for a good part of the video. But, you know, we get the Wandering Emperor because, of course, we do. We get Eternal Wanderer because it's awesome. You know? So this is a nice little top-end deck. It's got a lot to do once it gets to 6 and especially 7 mana. Italy's a hell of a drug. But it got some other stuff. You know, we play Ossification even though there's only 7 basic lands in the deck. So playing with fire a little bit on that one, but I also noticed, by the way, the deck has all 4 Roadside Reliquary, even though it's a 2-color deck, and it's got 4 Cabaret Courtyard and only has the 24 lands. You would think that a deck like this would have 26, 27, like some of the other ones that we've looked at, especially if it's going to play Courtyard and Roadside Reliquary. But no, you know, again, we've got Ambitious Farmhand. We got ways of drawing lands and stuff like that with Spirited Companion. Lauren can help draw lands. Sarah Paragon can replay the things to get the lands for us. So, you know, even with just 24, I say just 24 lands, but you know, there's 2 6-drops and 3 7-drops. So, you know, again, you'd think a deck like this would play some more lands. But no, it's got plenty of things to get the lands for it. And I think that's really, really cool. By the way, it's also got the Roadside Reliquary and Cabaret Courtyard combo with Sarah Paragon. So you can draw cards and replay your lands and draw more cards, or go find more lands and, you know, gain life or stuff with Courtyard. So that's a neat little combo to have. Interested that there's one of these Roadside Reliquaries is not a Field of Ruin or whatever. But either way, I'm not here to really nitpick. I'm here to praise. That's exactly what this deck deserves. Really, really cool thing that they put together here. Good job, Daft and Direct. I want to take a quick look at Pepicera's build just to make sure there's nothing too different or out of the ordinary. No, it's almost the exact same list. They're playing 4 laydown arms, though, whereas the other player is not playing any laydown arms at all. Also playing 1 fewer Ossification, 1 fewer Italy, right? So they made some cuts to get that in, but their mana base looks much the same. They only have 1 Roadside Reliquary. They played all 4 Jetmir's Garden, whereas I'm pretty sure they played none Jetmir's Garden. I could see playing Jetmir's just because it makes a green mana to transform the Italy, but again, I'm pretty sure transforming the Italy is not really the biggest thing on your agenda, right? You're probably just trying to resolve the Italy in the first place. But one way or the other, just a really, really cool deck. Boros midrange has been like on the verge, right? Because Sanctuary Warden and Fable of the Mirror Breaker are so good together. And white has a bunch of targets, you know, like Spirited Companion and Ambitious Farmhand for the Fable to copy, aside from just Sanctuary Warden. So this has been a deck. Sometimes people play Boros Angels with Fable of the Mirror Breaker. And that's like a fun little deck that people have been on for a while, but it hasn't really broken out. None of these Boros mid-range decks have really broken into Standard, and it looks like this one is really knocking on the door with a couple of important finishes in the first week of Standard. But hey, that's all I got for this one. I had a few more decks written down, but I think I might save those either for stream or for, you know, Patreon polls, deck techs, and stuff like that. There were more than just these 3 new decks this week, believe it or not. You know, Mom didn't have the biggest effect so far, at least, on the environment. We do have these 3 new decks, a couple of more new decks, and again, a bunch of cards are sneaking into already existing decks. So, you know, Mom is doing some things in the format, and it looks like there's plenty more things for it to do. I've seen, you know, 3 to 5 color battles decks doing work out there and all kinds of stuff. So let me know what your favorite new decks of the format are. I've seen all kinds of stuff from Hidetsugu combo to like Yargle and the creature that lets you fling other creatures just killed me in 1 turn. Did not see it coming. It was amazing. So like there's some pretty nasty stuff out there in the world right now. Let me know what your favorite decks you've seen this first week of Standard are. Aside from that though, the deck I've been playing all week is Phyrexocrats or Phyrexian Aristocrats or whatever. I've been playing that deck for a solid week since the format started, and I finally put the deck tech for it up on YouTube. It's got an example game, power rankings, coffee break, the couch card of the video, whatever. It's got all the stuff that you really like, and a lot of in-depth analysis and just jokes and puns and stuff. So go check that out. It's on the channel right now. Phyrexocrats is one of the more fun decks I've worked on in a minute. But of course, since we put out the deck tech, there's also a brand new Patreon poll that just came out an hour ago. If you're interested in voting in that and picking our next deck, go to the link in the description, patreon.com/SBMTG. It's just $1 a month to vote on stuff. Anyway, we got one more thing to do, and it is, because I never miss it, couch card of the video. What's it going to be? What is this card? I'm not looking at this card. What's it going to be? Oh, okay. It is a Bad River. It is not the one from Mirage. I wish that it was the Bad River from Mirage, but it is not that. It is the Bad River from some commander set or another. These are the original fetch lands. Before we had Evolving Wilds, before we had actual fetch lands or Terramorphic Expanse or whatever, we had these. They enter the battlefield tapped, and then you can tap them to go and get an untapped one of 2 different basic land types, right? So for a long time, these are the cards instead of actual fetches, right? These are the cards that we use to go get, like this is a Bad River. It goes and gets a swamp or an island. So I can go get a tropical island with this, right? Because that's an island. So, right. Or I can go get the black-red dual land, Badlands. I can go get that, because that's a swamp. So, kind of neat. You can also, by the way, go and get triomes with these. So these are cool little cards. You see them in cubes sometimes and occasionally commander decks, but not super often really. But they had a legacy for a while, and I want to remember that. But anyway, history lesson over, I guess. Never know what you're going to get at the end of a dev video. But that's all I got for this one. Just do all the stuff, like the video, sub if you haven't done it yet for more content like this. If you like this, we do stuff like this all the time. Maybe join the squad, But anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. I appreciate you coming by, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.